All right, well, let's make a little bit of a start. People are going to come throughout this session, of course, and I'll just let you all in as that occurs. It's great to have you. This is our string wag number 4, and it promises to be an excellent string wag, and I can't wait to introduce my guest to you, despite the fact he probably doesn't need that much of an introduction. So my name is Karen Kyriakou. I am the host of String Wag, and I warmly welcome you all here tonight. Before officially starting, of course, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where we are and waterways on which we are all gathered this evening, paying respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extending those respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here that may be here today, and acknowledge the important role that music and learning and culture has played on these lands over tens of thousands of years. So we're up to number 4. We've had Loretta Finn sharing top tips for beginners. We've had Stephen Chin sharing his approaches to accelerate students from intermediate to advanced. We've had Karen Chan sharing approaches to making an ideal community environment for students with lots of performances. And tonight I welcome my very special guest, Evgeny, Dr. Evgeny Sorkin. So Evgeny is a lecturer in violin at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. He's an accomplished performer, having started a performance career at an early age in Europe. As a child prodigy, Evgeny was recognised by Isaac Stern, who invited him to tour the USA. That's pretty impressive. At 16, after hearing Evgeny perform, Sir Yehudi Menuhin likened his playing to that of a young David Oistrakh. I'm going to ask you more about that later. Evgeny is a magna cum laude graduate of the Moscow State Conservatorium and further studied with Professor Alex Wharton at ANAM and at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, where he is the first person in the history of the University of Sydney to be conferred a Doctor of Musical Arts degree. Wow. Evgeny Sorkin continues to maintain a significant performing career to date. He's the winner of various international competitions as a solo violinist and as a member of the Brevis Piano Trio. He's recorded a discography with performances and broadcasts on numerous radio stations. He's a delight to talk to, a wealth of knowledge beyond my comprehension, an incredible teacher and communicator. And so tonight we welcome you, Dr. Evgeny Sorkin.
Thank you so much, Karen. What an introduction.
I think it wrote itself. Your accomplishments speak for themselves. My first introduction to you was during 2020, and it was lockdown, and that's where we learnt to use Zoom, and we've since forgotten, you and I have both forgotten how to use it, which is great. And you gave a fascinating talk on the history of Russian music, I think it was, and I wanted a whole podcast of it. Since then, we've met in real life at the Oster conference, of course, and social media keeps me up to date with all the amazing things that you're doing. But you were in Brisbane this weekend. So what was happening in Brisbane, aside from the sunshine?
Yes, not so much sunshine, mainly indoors for me. It was the finals of National Youth Concerto competition, which the Queensland Youth Orchestra hosts, and one of my students was the finalist playing the Sibelius Violin Concerto with the Queensland Youth Orchestra.
Congratulations.
So fabulous. He didn't win. And there is a young student of my colleague at Sydney Conservatorium, student of Janet Davis. She won this competition and she played also outstandingly well. It was such an occasion to watch those young violinists play. So I was there supporting and cheering for my student.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. Imagine having a student fly into-state to come and watch you. Your teacher flying interstate to watch you perform. That must in itself boost confidence enormously. So, before we go down your topic today, which I will talk about in a moment, can you give us a bit of an overview of what a typical working week might look like for you?
Wow. I work a lot. My work is divided between teaching students. I teach obviously the tertiary students at the university level, and I run violin ensemble with Professor Götz Richter, and I take pedagogy classes in some semester, and chamber music. And majority of my teaching is one-on-one teaching, obviously.
Yeah.
And I also work in the Conservatorium's Rising Stars program, which is for school-age students, gifted school-age students. And I teach at the Con High, so it's busy. It's
How
and
many
on
students?
top of that, I do some research, and on top of that, I have to maintain my practice because I still play concerts. In
You
fact,
do.
this coming Sunday, I have a wonderful concert with my trio in Sydney. I'm playing the trio arrangement of Verklarte Nacht by Schoenberg and Beethoven's Second Symphony, which is also arranged for the piano trio. That's the only symphony that Beethoven himself arranged for a piano trio.
Really? I did not know that.
Neither did I. It's actually a tremendous program. I'm very much looking forward to playing
Wow.
it.
So if you're in Sydney and you weren't doing anything, was it this Sunday that you said? Where can
It's the coming Sunday, yeah.
where can people find it?
Um, there is link. It is at 6 o'clock at the Sydney Conservatorium, and we can put a link at the end for anyone.
Yeah, do that. Let's send me the info and I'll send it out because that'd be really fun. I'm sure that you'll have a few. I mean, you have fans already. Tickets went crazy, but you'll have even more fans at the end of tonight. So let's just like say it. Let's call a spade a spade. You're very accomplished, Evgeny, and not just as a performer and a teacher, but also as an academic. And so what's your driving force here? What's going on?
I have a lot of questions, and when I can't figure out an answer, I don't stop until I do. So when something interests me, I start looking into things, I start researching things, and eventually I figure out most of the things. I like to ask questions.
Do you find out the answers to your questions?
In some cases, I can ask questions from my colleagues, and we are very lucky. I think we're very lucky in general in Australia that the string teachers community is very open and very sharing, and I feel completely comfortable calling one of my colleagues or texting or emailing one of my colleagues and saying, I'm struggling with this. What would you do? Can't seem to solve a problem. How would you solve it? And never have anyone actually turned me down saying that no, I'm not going to share this information with you.
Yeah, I mean, we want to be
So
building on knowledge, don't we? Don't want to keep knowledge a secret.
yeah, we want to share knowledge. We want to build on knowledge, and I'm happy to share my knowledge when somebody asks me questions. And my studio doors are open for any teachers who want to come and sit and observe the lessons, provided the students are comfortable with it.
Yeah,
And yeah, it works both ways.
awesome. So I called you Dr. Evgeny, and that's because you have a doctorate. And your topic of your doctorate, I don't know what it was. I mean, I've started one and it's already changed topics like twice already. So I don't know what you started with and what you ended with, but you ended with a topic, acute warm-up effects in submaximal athletes, an EMG study of skill violinists. So EMG is
No,
electromyography, is that right?
yes, but that's not my PhD. That's the PhD I supervised.
Oh, that's your supervision PhD.
That
Okay.
was a supervision.
So what was your PhD?
Mine also had a fancy title that no one ever can remember. But in my PhD, I was looking at the development of violin technique and how does one accelerate technique quickly, and what is the selection of repertoire that goes behind teaching and developing technique.
Okay.
So
That feels more understandable to me. I can even ask you questions about that one.
yeah, I was thinking when I had to select a topic, I wanted to select one that is going to be immediately relevant to my teaching because I was already teaching at the time and I had a lot of questions back then. And I thought, yes, I want to do things better, or are there any ways of doing things better? So that was my research.
Have you always been driven? Have you always been this driven person?
Yes.
Yeah. That,
Ah,
Hands up if you're surprised by that answer. I'm not, no one's surprised by that answer. Well, that's pretty fun. So I did a bit of cyber stalking and I found a paragraph about your teaching philosophy on the Sydney Con website. And can I read it out?
Yes, I hope it's something recent. I'm not sure how long ago it was written, but
Yeah, well, maybe you can correct it if you think it's not, but it's pretty good. It goes like this. My teaching philosophy is largely influenced by the Russian violin tradition, where technical mastery serves artistic purpose. My central focus is to help students develop an understanding of how things work from the technical and artistic point of view and apply gained knowledge in their performance. This includes developing creative and stylistically aware musicians, but also to form tension-free and flexible movements that would allow students to perform with ease and maintain an injury-free career in music.
that is so well worded. I could put my name under every word.
It's like the perfect balance of every single thing that we would aspire to, isn't it? It's like we want technical mastery so that we can deliver the artistic outcomes, and we want to do it without breaking our bodies.
Yes, I think that's important. I think ultimately technique serves music. Music is the main goal, and music has to be supported by something. You cannot talk about phrasing if you don't know how to play loud and soft, or if there is problems with sound or problems with intonation, it interferes with music making.
Mm. I'm going to ask you a bit more about that interference later, because I think there's a continuum as well from what age and what when we start to address certain things with different students, because we can't give them everything at the start,
Absolutely.
and it's about all that age appropriate and their awareness, their ability to understand. But when for those of you that haven't popped into a string wag before, every time I ask somebody to come on, it's like, can you choose a topic that you're excited about? And sometimes I might kind of like feed a little topic, and every single time my guests ignore me, and it's great. They come back with a way better topic. And Evgeny came back with one, and he said, naturalness in gesture, technique, and phrasing. Does that sound interesting? And I nearly exploded, because to me that like sounds enormously interesting, because I've gone to a lot of conferences and a lot of PDs over my years, and I've never really heard anyone talk about naturalness. And we have sort of ventured down flow before and being in the flow state, but it's not the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing.
So over to you. We talked a little bit the other day about naturalness, and you had a friend who did yoga.
Yes, so that was a friend of mine. He sparked my interest in that. I am not into yoga. In fact, you can probably see I'm not into much fitness at all. Um, a friend of mine who is very much into yoga, we were speaking to him, and he was somehow describing his movements and this and that. And I thought, that sounds so fascinating. A lot of what we do on the violin, as far as the technicality is concerned, is also to do with movements. And a lot of the movements, well, playing violin is not quite natural thing to do. And a lot of great pedagogy talk about how hands have to be relaxed and how things have to be elastic, and how you want to create good sound and good resonance, and this all comes through balanced posture. But this idea, when you talk to a student, they don't really understand it. Majority of students don't understand if I tell them relax your shoulder, and they would look at me and shrug their shoulders. It was especially during the last time I used Zoom, which was about 3 years ago, with all the lockdowns. My students that I have been teaching before the lockdowns, they knew what they were doing, and I could point out and say, check your shoulder or check your wrist. And it worked really well for them. But the students who were just starting and who might not have been aware of things like that, they were struggling to understand what I was trying to get from them.
Mm.
And as I was in my mind spinning the idea and changing it and looking at it from different angles, a lot of the things that we do can be made natural, they can be made comfortable, and they become specific to the individual. Another factor that prompted me is when my students play some repertoire that I have played in the past. I have all my music from the past, and I would be happy to share my music, and I would give them the music and say, well, the fingering should be pretty good and the bowings should be pretty good, just do those. And soon enough, I discovered that a lot of my students um, were struggling with those fingerings or with those bowings. And actually, when I looked at them, I was struggling with my bowings, and
Mm.
I thought to myself, what was I thinking 20 years ago? This is so awkward, so uncomfortable. It's so unnatural.
Yeah.
But of course, growing up in Russia, in Moscow, we had this tradition that um, Oistrakh used those fingerings, and therefore you are going to use those fingerings. Or Kogan used those fingerings, and
Yeah.
therefore this has been passed down through generations.
Yeah. And on the surface, it's hard to argue with that, isn't it? Like, you know, they could do very well, so let's do what they did, but we're not them.
Yes, and also now facing a lot of different students, I think the demographics have changed. If
Mm.
the fingerings or the bowings that were written, or even the music that was written in 19th century was, I think, largely played by the European white males, the demographics is not the same. We have more women, we have more ethnicities playing string instruments, and some of the music written back then, and so some of the fingerings, it just doesn't work.
Why doesn't it work?
Like, for example, for the stretches become too big,
Okay.
the run in tenths that might be doable for one person might be a huge struggle for someone else.
Okay. So you pursued this idea of naturalness, and you pursued the idea of the whole body. And I remember one of my big moments was reading The Art of Violin. I'm sure everybody on has read it, and about this having tension in a part of your body, and saying, well, that is not, you don't just have tension in your shoulder. It doesn't, you're not relaxed and then have tension in your shoulder. The whole body is tense if you are tense in your shoulder, and making contact to the ground is where you first observe your tension. And that was a game changer for me. But you've taken this like 900 steps further. And so let's talk a little bit about muscle and skeleton and bow holds and all kinds of things, because we're striving for musical outcome. We're striving to use the body at its best. And so how do you introduce this with students, and where and what point of their development and musicality are you going this next level?
I introduced it very early and very casually, as a matter of fact. With even with little things, for example, the violin sitting on the collarbone. A lot of the students would not know where the collarbone is or where it connects. And I don't have a specific medical training, obviously, but I know that it goes from on top of the sternum and connects here, propping up the shoulder blade. So obviously, if somebody was to sink the chest in, the collarbone, from being this angle, starts to change to a more diagonal, more vertical angle. Judging by your face, I have conspicuously hidden violin here. I can show it to you.
Well, my face wasn't like, you prompted a big thought actually, and about Paul Roland and his movement methods, and something that he talked about, that that the freedom creating that big sound. If you don't have that freedom, you don't have that resonance, and the collarbone with that cavity, it muffles resonance.
So if the violin was, if the collarbone is there, it's sitting fairly flat.
Mm.
My violin can sit on top of that. The moment I was to sink in my chest,
Mm.
which is something very common we see in the students, sink chest, bring the shoulder forward to help prop up the violin. Yes, but suddenly the violin is not really sitting on a collarbone. It can be leaning against it, but it's not sitting on top of it. Yes, so little things like that. Then I was thinking another question with the bow sliding around. How many teachers complain to the students the bow is sliding around? And I have two children, 11 and 7, so perhaps they're now a little bit older, but when they were younger, I used to go with them to the playground quite a lot. And I was observing them going on a slide. And everyone knows how the slide works. You sit on top and you slide down. While I was sitting on a bench, which is effectively the same slide except horizontal. And I wasn't sliding anywhere. So I would ask my students that the playing portion of the string stays horizontal, and then the bow doesn't seem to slide. So not that, but just looking. So that giving them little pointers, not that, oh, the scroll has to be as high as your chin, lips, nose, or anything like that. I would just tell them, let's just keep this part like a bench, horizontal. And little things like that with the posture. And another thing that with the sound, is the bow was invented, our modern bow was invented in late 1700s. And we know that it was created by Tourte, French maker Tourte, and it was somewhat instigated by Viotti. So after many years of transitional bows from the Baroque bow, we arrived at what is known as the modern bow, and it hasn't really changed since that time.
Mm.
And the weight of the bow is also fairly set at the same weight of about 58 grams. So 57-gram bow is considered light. 62, 63 grams is starting to be heavy. So within a couple of grams difference. So obviously, if Viotti went into a Tourte's shop and said, my friend Tourte, I want a bow. And Tourte said, okay, sure, there is 20 on the shelf, just pick one. And he probably said something, no, I want something different.
Mm.
And then Tourte would ask him, okay, what do you want? And judging by the result we got, he would have said, well, I want a bow that can do all kinds of bouncy strokes, and the one that I could play long strokes and sustained strokes. And obviously one of those should have been, and I want one that sounds good. And Tourte would have said, yes, of course, we'll make you a bow, no problems. So they come up with our design. At that point, they have created the bow that, in their opinion, made all the things that are required of us. And given that in the following 200-something years, our bow has not changed, it obviously still satisfies those criteria. So, I doubt that Tourte would have said, I will create a bow that has all of those characteristics, but I will make it 10 grams too heavy so that you have to lift it up all the time. Or the other way, I'll make it 2 grams too light so that you always have to press on it. Like, I don't know.
Yes.
Those are the natural things that I think about. Yes, so the bow was created to draw a beautiful resonant sound out of the violin. And if we were to not interfere with that, it should still happen.
Yeah, but the instruments have changed in that amount of time. Are you saying bow technique hasn't changed? Well, the strings and technology, I suppose, about instruments technically, I mean, I suppose no, they are really the same, but there's aspects about the instruments that are different from 200 years ago.
There are some aspect. Well, the strings have become somewhat different, but I don't think that it has changed that much.
Not enough. Yeah. Okay.
For example, one of the exercises that I would ask my students to do is let the bow sit on the string, and that might need to move a little bit. I'll lean it a little bit. And just let the bow sit on the string like that. And practice making good sound. And you can see that I'm not really using any force, and I can use any fingers. I'm just providing the sideways movement. And if I can create a clean and resonant sound, it's just the bow sitting on the string making the sound.
So we were chatting about the skeleton last time, and we were talking about, I mean, you were talking specifically about the pinky and the role of the pinky and the different positions of what is skeleton, what is muscle. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm in my element. I can talk about.
I know, and I think that everyone here is going to love it. So, and I'd rather hear from you than me. So just do it.
Well, I suppose many people, like myself, growing up, we were taught pinky going like that, and then doing all kinds of exercises like this to do it. Now, at this point, we know. Well, firstly, let's start with the joints in our finger. They're yes, those joints are designed to open and close.
Yeah.
Yes. If they're called hinge joints, and they're designed to open and close. So the way I was taught to put my pinky, it's the same as many, is in the way how it's designed to open and close. Now, for me to balance the bow like this requires, well, okay, fine, I did a lot of practice in my day.
I'm sure you still do it now.
I have to. It's the muscles that have to balance it out. But we know by the same way that my finger is designed to bend this way, but it's not designed to bend sideways. So if I was to put my little finger with a slight bend to the side, like that, it just brings it off that axis, slightly like that. Yes, I don't
do it with a pencil.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've done it before, so I can do it with.
Yeah.
So it does not rely on my muscles to balance it out, because it's to do with my skeleton, and it just doesn't bend that way. I still have the freedom to do all of those movements, but at the same time, it's not taxing on my muscles. And it's actually a really slight bend. It's not a huge bend. It's just enough to be off the axis of how it bends. Like that it collapses. Like that it doesn't.
And with your students, I mean, while you're doing this, and I'm just going, I mean, it looks amazingly natural for you. And then I'm thinking about some of my students and how unnatural it looks for them. And yes, you've done more hours, let's just agree. And your students, I mean, they are pretty advanced. You take advanced students. You don't teach beginners these days, do you? I know you would have.
I teach students from a young age.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm very good with complete beginners.
Right.
So I don't teach a lot of people. I have I have in the past, I have taught some from completely, they came for the first lesson having never seen a violin in their life. But I do teach young students from
Yeah.
the age of 6, 7, but the ones who would have had at least like 6 months or 1 year of
Yeah.
some violin lessons.
Yeah. And do you find that that they're able, if they're shown that straight away, that they can keep that naturalness, that relaxedness in there? Is it something that they still just, even with your students, have to grow into?
Um, yes and no. With little students, a lot of pedagogy is not everyone from the at a young age can understand and process what is happening.
Mm.
So some of it is reflexes, and some of it is close your eyes and close your ears and fix one element and
Yeah.
neglect the other 20 going wrong.
And I suppose it depends on the student or the approach that you're going to take as well. The naturalness is such a great word. And I think that the language that we use when we teach has such a huge impact on students' understanding as well. So if we're using the word natural rather than relax, the word relax can make tension come not relax, but natural, well, that we can all do natural, right? Because that's just natural.
Yeah.
And I had this student years ago, it was a long time now, and I feel like I didn't kind of get where I needed to with her. And she was okay, she was quite good. But she had so much ego in her playing that all of the tension and all of her headiness got in the way of every single thing to do about the music. And it, like, for me as a teacher, that whole idea of growth mindset and using words to encourage that there's still more work to do, and looking at the skill and moving the goalpost. But I think that her home environment had told her that she's an amazing, her value was certainly put on how she was as a musician, and she felt that by playing louder and faster and harder, she was going to be a much better musician. And I feel like I never fixed it. I never, there was a precociousness about it, let's say. But I mean, have you had those students where you've had to really try and move the ego away so that it became more about the music, and how you might have done that?
Yes, I do have to deal in the past. I have dealt with students with big ego, and often it comes from the parents.
Mm.
So it's educate the child and educate the parent. And with some parents, I had to sit down and have a chat and
Oh.
explain that it's actually not good for music. Um, our world, everyone knows everyone. I bump now into the people who I was friends with 30 years ago, and if I did not have a good relationship with them back then, it would make my meeting with them now a lot more awkward.
Mm.
Also, I suppose it helps that I run late so many days that the students end up listening to one another. So whenever they are thinking that, well, they can do something well, often they get to hear someone else who can do something else equally well.
Yeah. Well, this,
So
I
there
think,
is
is key. Yeah.
this awareness that they're not the only one. That
Yeah.
there are people, and that music is collaborative, and we play a lot of duos and trios and quartets.
Yeah. And that continuum, I mean, you've never, I did meet a little Suzuki boy a couple of years ago, and he told me that he's done all of the pieces in violin, all violin pieces,
Wonderful.
which was a good achievement because we haven't.
Yeah, I have.
We have. But I mean, this is a good time probably to see if anybody that's having a listen has got some questions for Evgeny. You can either punch them in the chat if you don't want to talk, or you can, unmute yourselves and ask him a question. And have a little think about it. And I'm going to ask you about your teachers that you had and the legacy they left you.
I was extremely lucky. Um, when I was little, I started my lessons with a brilliant teacher for young violinists, Boris Levin. Victoria Mulova was his student as well. And after that, I had lessons with my great aunt for a little while, who was a tremendous violinist. And I'm very happy today. The violin I demonstrated on was my great aunt's violin, which I just recently had fixed.
Wow.
After she passed away 5 years ago, I could not play on it for a while, and just recently I fixed it. About 10 days ago I got it back. I can't get my hands off it. Then when I was in high school, I had lessons with Leonid Zayde, wonderful teacher who lives in Melbourne.
Okay.
I don't think he teaches anymore. And he was very important in a way that I think he was the first person who really somehow encouraged me to love music. The actual passion for music. I always enjoyed music, and I enjoyed playing, and I never enjoyed practicing like I think majority of people. But he instilled in me love for music. And then when I finished high school, I went and I studied at the Moscow Conservatorium with Professor Sergei Kravchenko, who was teaching assistant of Leonid Kogan in his younger years. And by the time when I arrived in Moscow, he was the head of the strings faculty at the Moscow Conservatorium. And I had tremendous lessons with him. And of course, the legacy of, well, Kogan did those fingerings and he did those bowings, and a lot of the stuff was happening. And then when I graduated Moscow Conservatorium, I was extremely lucky to study with Alice Wotton.
Yeah. What a legacy she has left in this country.
Oh, absolutely tremendous. And it all happened by accident. It wasn't exactly planned. But it just worked out this way. And while I was a student of Alice, I also had lessons with Boris Kushner, who used to come and visit Annam twice a year, staying a few weeks each time. And that was incredible. He was one of those technicians who could explain to you everything from the point of view of every finger. He would say, well, at this point, your index finger would do this, and your middle finger would do this, and your ring finger would do that. It was so detailed and so incredible. It changed my views on violin playing, on violin teaching. Everything got changed at that point. And I did teach some of the things that he taught me, and then I changed my opinion on some other things. But lessons with him was a huge revelation. First lesson I had with him, I was maybe 24 years old or 25 years old. I played an open D string for an hour and a half.
Was that humbling?
Oh, definitely. Well, I approached those things with open mind. Yeah. I came there to learn, and his reputation speaks for himself. Yep. I had so many things to fix after that 1.5 hour lesson. He told me, come back 2 days later. So I went and I practiced like mad for 2 days, and I came back, and we had another hour of playing an open D string. And he said, okay, come back in 2 days' time, show me what you are doing. So I came back, I practiced some more D string, and I came back 2 days later. Finally, he nodded, and he said, good, now we can try A string. It was incredible. And then when I would bring for him some repertoire, I would prepare the whole concerto, and then for 2 hours we would work on the very first line of the first movement, and then I would have so many things to fix, because obviously if you know what to do on the first line and his comments, then by the time you fix it everywhere else.
Wow. It sounds like, though, that was a real turning point of your own, of the way that you were then thinking about your own playing.
Yes.
like bigger than you could imagine that you were ever going to need to think about.
And because I always had the curiosity about the playing and the curiosity about the teaching, all of those experiences, they were all transformational, and I still learn and I still like to listen to my colleagues teach. A few years ago, the Sydney Conservatorium supported me in going to Juilliard, where I could sit and observe lessons.
Amazing.
So I'm still learning.
Yeah. I think
I hope
that's
to
the
be better.
sign, isn't it, of a good teacher, though? I mean, there's no, I've made it. I've learnt everything. Well, you know, we know that. Does anyone have any questions for Evgeny? I've got like thousands and thousands more, but I would love it if anyone would like to either throw something in the chat, or else I'll just keep going. Or maybe you want to jump online. There you go. Can you share some approaches you have found useful for encouraging students to produce an open and resonating tone, particularly students who skate across the strings a little?
Yes, of course. Approaches to open and resonating tone. Yes, so I can show this. I usually do a couple of exercises. What I have found is that most students who don't produce nice and resonant tone, they have tension in their shoulder. So the number one majority of the exercises that I would do are to free up this shoulder. Once Robin Wilson showed me an exercise that he likes to do with his students, and I think it's absolutely brilliant, where he would just, I would move a little bit back, where you check that the body is balanced and the weight goes through the heels into the ground, and hips align with the heels, and the shoulder blades feel like they're hanging down towards the heel as well. So you end up, the posture is, you are standing as if you are sitting a little bit more that way. And with the arm to slowly lift it up and just let it flop down. That's one of those exercises. And usually before you do this exercise, just notice how heavy the arm actually is. So the weight of our arm is approximately 5% of the overall body weight for a normal student. So it's actually, for me, it's quite a few good kilos. But I will stop there. So that's the first exercise. The second exercise that I would ask my students to do is to feel that the arm is hanging down from the shoulder, one, and that the hand is hanging down from the wrist. So I have 2 points of drop here and drop there. And then do an infinity sign exercise where the arm is moving from the shoulder joint. So go this way and go this way. And do it at a moderate speed. So my hand is not moving, my arm, I'm not opening or closing anything there. The whole movement happens from the shoulder, because that's the bit that we are trying to relax. And stop at random points and just check that it's hanging here and hanging here. And could be here, could be there, could be there. Same idea, that it's hanging. So that's the first exercise that I would do with the students who are struggling with the quality of sound. Second exercises I will check is that the thumb and the middle fingers are free enough. So I would keep my fingers same, and for the thumb to slightly loosen up and let the bow slide between the fingers. So the fingers don't change shape, it's just that my thumb is getting light enough that the bow slips through my fingers. And we can do this vertically, and as a slightly more advanced version, you can put the bow on the string, yes, and the same thing. Get the fingers, to slide across while supporting. So this just teaches students about the balance and about how loose the fingers can stay. And then the exercise that I have shown, just encouraging students to get a nice sound there. And the last exercise I would do in that set is probably, oh no, just one second. Two more exercises.
2 more, awesome.
Two more exercises, since we were talking about the shoulder, in case my students are joining your podcast, they would say, no, you forgot something. Do a circle. As if I'm doing like a freestyle swimming. Do a circle in there and then do a circle with the bow touching the string.
Yeah.
And what I'm looking for is that I'm not doing anything special with my fingers or with my hand. It's all loose, and I just want a short sound, but a long echo.
Oh, short sound, long echo. That's a nice way to think about that.
Because that echo is essentially what resonance is, that natural vibration of the string.
It's something that the students can understand very quickly, though. They know what to listen for with the word echo.
Yeah. And then do this exercise where my hand travels above the bow and then with the bow. And at the start I would do it with the little bow, checking that the speed, the weight, and everything stays the same.
Yeah, cool.
Especially during the bow change. And then little by little I would just make it slightly longer. Paying careful attention that it is still keeps at the same weight and the same speed. And the resonance, I like to think of it in terms of a bell effect. Like if you hit the bell and it goes dong. And when I change the bow, I want this dong to continue. That it's not that we killed off one and started the other one, but that it continues and grows.
Nice one. Questions come in about what kinds of things do you do? Do you get your students to do away from the instrument?
Oh, I get my students to do lots of exercises without the instrument for left hand and right hand. So if I talk about the left hand, I get my students, when we practice vibrato exercise, just to make sure that this joint is free enough to move in a passive kind of way. So I can do it like this, or I can do it.
It's gone.
With a pencil. I was just reaching for a pencil.
Nice.
Like this.
Oh, that's cool.
Without the pencil. And then I can move this hand or I can move that hand. Just getting this joint to be floppy without involving the other joints.
Do you get them to do mental practice as well?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. I get my students. I ask my students. I cannot say that I get them. At best, I can ask and hope that they listen, and believe that I told them something worthwhile.
Yeah. That'd be crazy not to take your advice, though, wouldn't they? I mean, honestly.
But then, yeah, a lot of the exercises for the action of the fingers, for example, if the hand gets stiff, I get students to wiggle each of the fingers and then do one action from the nail joint and then wiggle the fingers again and do the other way. So that tends to relax the hand a lot. So I can do it with 4 fingers and then first finger lightly holding and then 3 fingers move. And I check, I would get them to check every single time. So after you move one direction, you check, you move the other direction, you check again.
Yeah.
Yes. So all of those fingers and generally all the floppy movements of the fingers, because it's all very useful. Also, to relax this shoulder, I get them to hold their arm and practice dropping it, or hold it and wiggle it to check how loose the joints will stay for the vibrato. So
Yeah,
that
nice.
would be a lot of left hand exercises like that. For the right hand, well, some of the exercises I have already shown, all the stuff for the shoulders. And I do it first with the arm band because it puts less weight on the shoulder. But then as a student can do it, its majority is that this muscle gets tight.
Mm.
So then I can do it a little bit more extended and still the same movement. So as you extend the arm, it puts more pressure on the shoulder.
One of the things that, like, you're reading in, you probably don't have time to read magazines and bad news articles, but about mobile phones and, you know, this head coming down all the time, and you know, we were climbing trees as kids, and now we're, you know, the kids are on iPads. Are you noticing that is changing some of the posture of students coming through today?
I have not personally seen an effect in that.
Mm.
Um, I do see a lot of students who have bad posture
Mm.
that that, that need fixing, but I would not connect it with the use of mobile phones. I mean,
And iPads. Yeah.
slouching teenagers. I don't think this is something that is
Yeah,
to.
and the heavy head. I mean, doing Alexander for a little amount of time, and the weight of the body and using gravity to do its thing was, you know, something very important. And that head being so heavy, falling forward to scroll is only a source of tension. But we're coming to an end, not quite to an end, because I've got a series of really fast questions for you. The first one is, if you could talk to the graduate teacher Evgeny Sorkin, what would you tell him?
Keep learning, keep studying, and trust the process.
Trust the process. I love it. If you no, do you have a favorite piece of music?
Um, on the violin, I have gazillion of pieces. It's hard to pick
Do you have a
one.
favorite one today?
But I'd say Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto would be one of my absolute favorite.
It's a nice one. That's a nice one to have on the list. Do you have a favorite city?
City. Uh, to visit, I absolutely love Amsterdam. I played in the Concertgebouw and the Rijksmuseum and the Van Gogh Museum, and just wandering the canals.
And some of the cafes, maybe?
In cafe, of course.
What's the least favorite part of the work that you do?
It has to be the paperwork, isn't it?
I think that answer is consistent across all guests. Yeah, it's always the paper, because what we do is about people, right? About people and about music, and it's
Yeah,
not.
you see, there is no part of teaching that I don't enjoy.
Yeah,
If a student comes and they need my help with posture or with technique, I'm happy to explain.
yeah.
The
Oh,
paperwork is the hard stuff.
yeah. It's sort of a means to an end. What's the favorite part of the work that you do?
I think what drives me the most is seeing the positive transformation when I have a student who might have started and like they don't know what to do, what they are struggling with something, and then suddenly after some lessons and they recognize that, oh, I can actually do
Yeah.
this, so I can do that. When they realize themselves that they're actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I think this positive transformation, that's the best part of my job.
Yeah, and you are genuinely proud of your students when they succeed. Like you are really excited by their successes, which is beautiful.
Of course, I cheer for them always.
If you could offer teachers one single piece of advice to take on about their teaching, what would that be, and what impact would it have?
Oh,
Just a little small question to finish up there.
a small question that would require a lot of thinking.
Or one piece of wisdom that you could impart to teachers?
I think the most important part is make it about the music. That it's all about the music. A lot of the sometimes teaching that I see, suddenly it's easy to get sidetracked. Then, oh, we're going to fix that rowdy pinky, or we're going to work on this. But ultimately, it's all about the music.
Mm.
All the pinky or not pinky, the fingering, every technical bit, it all has to be about the music.
I think keeping it about the music really helps students to understand why they have to do all the technique, as opposed to the other way around. If you can't play music until you do this technique, we sell it with the music. And I think that's a really nice way to present our teaching, is we're here to play music, and if you want to get better, here's what you've got to do. Not like a drill, not like military, not like in the army. Here's all the things that you have to do, and make it unfun. Because I think you'd be a very fun teacher. You'd be pretty strict, I think, but you'd be pretty fun to learn from as well.
I hope so. I hope
Would that
to.
be fair? Yeah, I reckon that'd be really fair.
I try to be fair. If a student comes and they play very well, I'll be all over them with praises. If they come and they don't play so well, they'll hear about it as well.
Was the Russian violin school full of praises, or was that much more?
Absolutely not. Absolutely
I think I
not.
probably knew the answer to that already. But you've come like really about face on that.
I have changed. That's why I wrote in that little blurb that you read, that yes, I come from Russian teaching school, and that is a lot of my foundations is in that. I've been developing past that, and living in Australia and having a lot of international
Mm.
experience changed my views on a lot of things,
We are so very lucky.
including the teacher-student interactions.
Yeah, I like um what I see now. Like I don't teach the students and instruments, of course, but I like when I see how they interact with their instrumental teachers, and the collegialness between them, and the discussions that they have about outcomes, rather than having outcomes imposed upon them. And I like the conversations that I see there. So yeah, we're very lucky to have you here. And so I want to thank you very much for joining me tonight and sharing what would probably the thinnest slice of the wealth of knowledge that's in that brain of yours, in that purple shirt, in that brain of yours. So just everyone, can you please thank Evgeny for joining us tonight? He's just like the best. And your generous insights and sharing your ideas and with us, that's amazing. I will pop the video of this up over the next couple of days. Slightly busy this week, but I'll really try and get it up tomorrow or the next day. And then also, if you've liked this series, which is sort of the end of the year, because this is term 4, somehow we got to term 4, and I'd love to keep doing it next year. And I'm aware that I've only chosen really violinists this year, so I'm going to be mindful of that for next year as well, and explore some maybe other clefs as well. But thank you so much for your time tonight, and people for coming along and joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Karen, for
Bye.
having me, and thank you for our chat, and thank you for all the listeners.